So when I was growing up in Long Island, my brother and I used to walk home alone. We were latchkey kids of the variety that my father was at home and ignored us, and we let ourselves in through the backyard. And in preparation for my 4-block walk home from school, and to complement the white belt of participation I had in karate from silent flute, my father read me a story, actually an instructional book, called Say No to Strangers, which was ironic because the very fact that he could read me this book is because once upon a time he said yes to a stranger, my mother. It's hard for me to tell a happy story of my parents' marriage, although I know there was much hope and possibility in the 11 days between when they first met and the day they got married, and in the first few weeks of their marriage before they got to know each other. But it is in the fissure of their incompatibility that my personality lies, and their persistence to lead a successful life that characterizes so much of the Indian immigrant experience and makes me proud to be their daughter. In 1977, my father was 29 years old and a doctor in Iran, working at an oil company under the Shah, pre-revolution. He had a company house, made 22,000 rupees a month, which is about a little under $10,000, and it was time for him to get a wife. So he went back to India with a visa, an Iranian visa, for a yet-to-be-named Mrs. D'Souza. He started making house calls. It's sort of like being a door-to-door salesman, except he was entering the home of Mangalorean Catholics who had daughters of marriageable age, and the salesmen were their fathers and mothers. He met my grandmother at a party. She was very, very beautiful. She was 5'7", slim, 110 pounds, carried herself like Jackie Kennedy, and much of her 110 pounds, I am told, were concentrated in her very large breasts. My grandfather was a prominent, respected doctor who worked for the government. And when my father met my grandmother, she told him that she had 2 daughters of marriageable age. He went to their house and was struck by my mother. She had what we call as luction, which I suppose is more like the French equivalent of je ne sais quoi, a certain something. She was dark-skinned and he was fair, which was a very unusual match, but considering they came from the same community, I suspect that it had less to do with my father's progressive values and more to do with his fear of inbreeding. So they met, and that night my father called my grandmother and said that he would like to invite my mother for breakfast. She said, oh yes, she will be there, even though my mother had work. My father came to the house in the morning, and my mother told me that he's never looked more handsome in his life. My mother remembered of that night that my dad smoked cigarettes and drank, both of which she detested. But my grandmother assured her that he is a good man, but he will be bald by 30. Both of which were true. On the way, when they were walking to the taxi to get dosas for breakfast, my father asked my mother, what do you think about moving to Iran? And she said, Iran? I thought we would get to know each other. And he classically responded, what for? Within 11 days, they got married and moved to Iran. But by the end of '77, they suspected that revolution was coming. They would hear stories in the paper that a movie theater showing an English movie would be locked up and burned down. There were tanks coming into Tehran, and while they were still waiting on their green card, they booked a flight to London. When they went to Tehran to take their flight, they heard that all of the flights had been grounded. So my mother wrapped a sari around her head and used my sister, my newborn baby sister, as leverage to beg onto a flight. They were told that there was only one flight left. It was a British Airways crew flight because British Airways had ordered all their employees to come back out of Iran. They took pity on my mother and my father and my baby sister, and they let them on. There was no in-flight service, but there was plenty of liquor, and when they took off, my dad cheersed and got drunk with the crew. They arrived at Heathrow with video cameras, videotaping their arrival. 2 years later, they got their U.S. green card. And they came, and the reason that they were allowed to come as permanent residents is because my grandparents came. My grandfather did his residency in 1956 at NYU. And after he'd earned enough money, he sent for my grandmother, who took 1 month by ship to come here. And soon after they did, they gave birth to my aunt, who's wearing the pink over here, who was able to sponsor our entire family to come over. This was pre-9/11 when you could sponsor siblings. My parents arrived in Queens, and they noticed that people didn't look too different from themselves. And when I asked them, why do you think all the Indians settled in Queens? They said, it's probably because it was close to the airports. And I was born. They were home, and so was I. But at the time, and still now, Indian immigrants see Queens and Jackson Heights and Flushing as a launch pad to upward mobility. You stay here, you earn money, and then you buy a house, which they did. They went to Long Island, where I was raised. Now, last year, I lived out of New York for the first time of my life. I lived in Austin, Texas. And I remember one day, a pretty blonde girl said to me, Susan, you are not brown. You are white, just like us. And I wished she had said that to me 20 years ago when I was growing up in Long Island. I would have taken it as the biggest compliment. But not then. In fact, she inspired me to write my first and last country music song. Which, if you don't mind, I will sing a lyric of. I wanna rub the dirt off my skin. Polish white, you'll see what's within. Brush my hair blonde and blink my eyes blue. Cut out my fat, make me thin. 'Cause I wanna be the all-American girl. The all-American girl. And I wondered to myself, did I really believe that? Did I believe that that was what an all-American girl was? And I realized I didn't. Because I went to college in the city, and then I never went back to Long Island. I moved to Queens, where me and my Chinese boyfriend moved to a Greek area in Queens, where we rented from our Ecuadorian landlords. And it was the first time in my life that I wasn't Indian first and American second, or if I went to India, too dark, too outspoken, too divorced, and too not a virgin, to be considered American first and then Indian second. And I know that when I go and walk down on 74th Street and I eat Hyderabadi biryani and get Rajput sweets and buy spices and get my eyebrows threaded and look at fabric, that I feel completely whole. And I know that this is my promised land. And I know that I made it. Thank you.